Hey, comic book community, this is Mathboy Comics coming to you again from sunny Southern California. Wanted to do a video for some beginners slash novice collectors who are basically trying to figure out how to tackle their city or a nearby city that they're visiting and not necessarily just go randomly from one store to the next, not necessarily knowing what to expect. And this is kind of a more thought out or methodical way of identifying what stores will serve particular purposes. And I've broken this out into pretty much three different kinds of stores out there. I'm sorry, make that four. The first one is your comic shop slash game shop. This caters to both the casual comic book reader, but probably more so the actual gamer. Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, etc. The next book, and I'm going to go back to these. I'm going to go back to these shops in detail after I identify all four. The next bookstore is the what I would call like the hipster comic shop. It's something that just popped up in probably the more trendy part of town. Young person who's opened it up and they're looking to cash in or participate in the whole the comic book trend that's happening right now. The third is the bookstore slash comic book store, where they basically more focus on the trade paperbacks than they do, or probably as much or even more so than they do the actual comic books. And then lastly, the comic book store that we all kind of know and love, or that we try ourselves to support. So going back to the first one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to identify, how I've come to realize who they are, what to expect from them, and not to spend too much time over there, and how frequently to go visit them. Now, in the background, also, I'm just going to go through a couple of my Silver Age keys or Bronze Age keys and just kind of rotate them through intermittently. But we have again the comic book shop slash game shop. The regular clientele are gamers who happen to read comics, and that's kind of why the comics are there to a certain degree. Now, don't get me wrong, there could be very fantastic comic book stores that have realized that they also want to cash in on the game shop, but I don't include those. These are the ones where after a very quick conversation with with the store owner, you can pretty much tell what you can get out of that store particularly. You find out that they pretty much carry just the latest things, probably not too big of a breadth of comics, probably mostly like DC, some Image, and Marvel. And they're there pretty much to get the current issues. Now, the question then becomes, what's the value of these to somebody like myself collecting? I would go there on occasion, for example, if there's a regular cover book that is trending, basically. So, for example, a couple months back, you had Uncanny Inhumans number 11, the first print, first full appearance of Mosaic. Basically, that book would have been sitting there on their shelves simply because the clientele would not necessarily be aware of it. Now, granted, the Uncanny Inhumans, that title in and of itself is probably not as popular as Amazing Spider-Man, so it might even be a better. Let's see. Oh, there's not that much glare there. There may be more copies of the Amazing Spider-Man 15, the Mary Jane Iron Spider cover, that you would have been able to find, or for that matter, even like the Riri Williams Invincible Iron Man 7 and Invincible Iron Man 9. Those particular books are they're important, or these stores are important for yourself in the sense that you're able to go over there and pick one up or maybe two for cover price, without the store owner not, them not necessarily knowing its actual value, and being able to mark it up at that point, and even being like, let's say, for example, 2 months old, where, you're still looking for that third or that fourth copy of that particular book. So, there isn't really too much to say about that, about this particular type of store, other than that. I mean, you may find yourself saying to yourself, how do I know what what type of shop this is? One of the smartest ways to do it is to kind of look on Yelp, see if they have photos of the store, if they highlight gaming, and if they highlight both gaming and also comic books. The other thing you also want to figure out is, do they have back issue bin? You'd probably want to call ahead and ask things like, hey, do you carry back issues? How far back do you go? Do you do Bronze Age, Silver Age, or just moderns? And being able to decipher what that is based off of the quality of the answer that they give you probably tells you a lot. They may not necessarily be too big on the more rare variants. However, they probably can carry some of the incentive variants, that are like 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 25 for the bigger prints. So, you might have something like the Women of Power, Mary Jane for Iron Man 7. That's something you might find, for example. Or if there's like a 1 in 10 Black Panther, you might find that. But, outside of that, you probably won't find, any, any special, any special variants that are too difficult to find. Also, for CGC support, this probably isn't the type of store that you'd be able to go in and say, hey, I want to have you guys help me submit my books to CGC. They probably don't have that capacity. And then lastly, for just incremental costs, they probably will sell you their bags and boards separately. Whereas like some stores, particularly, your local comic book store that's like the full-blown comic book store, they may just throw it in as a part of their service. Now, that's basically, I don't want to call it the lowest level, because that's very demeaning, but it's more of a sense of, it's something that you should have like the lowest expectation of. Then the next bookstore is the ones that have just popped up recently. I mean, for lack of a better label, calling it a hipster store is really more that idea that it's just a young person who is that wants to get into comics, wants to capitalize on being a retailer. It's very unlikely that this store again will have a back issue bin. They're basically, their whole goal is to simply turn around their books, what's current. They may also have like an eBay store in the background, so that they can probably be able to sell those on eBay and try to get as wide of a distribution net as possible. For variants, they'll probably have retailer incentives like a 1 in 10, 1 in 25. The good thing that separates these guys from the comic book slash game shop is that they'll probably carry a bigger breadth of titles. They'll probably be able to carry all of the Image. They'll be able to carry like Scout Comics and Aftershock and things like that. So that's good. And then on top of that, the variants, they will have the 1 in 10, maybe the 1 in 25s for even some of the more obscure lower print, lower print books, simply because if they are doing the eBay storefront as well, they'll probably have a bigger volume of books that they're trying to sell off. With regards to trying to, like I said, trying to get anything back issue, you also have to assume that these aren't necessarily the store owners that would go around and try to buy collections from from other people. Like you may see stores buying collections on Craigslist and whatnot. I don't think that this is the store that does that, or this is not the type of store that does that. This is really more of them selling the modern books that are currently out there, and taking advantage of the markup, and also being aware of the value of some retailer incentives. Now, the third one, and you also want to call these guys, before I switch over to the third type of store, trying to find this particular type of, or identify this particular type of store in your city or as you plan to be traveling to another city. Um, again, you may want to be able to go there and pick up, an extra copy of a book that may be trending if, their clientele isn't too up on things. They may have that extra copy, something that they don't realize that that book has a first appearance of, someone that everyone's speculating on. So, the easiest way to call them is to just basically ask them, if they carry a couple of like semi-obscure titles that can kind of give you the sense that, oh, they have a wider range of titles that they carry. If you ask them also if they have a back issue bin, if their response is not necessarily, they're not really, then you can kind of tell the like how far back the collection goes, and probably even asking them like when they opened and things like that. So that's basically type number two. Type number three is the bookstore slash comic store, and I'm all for these, but these stores simply because they help you fill in your collection in the sense of the trade paperback. If you want to read the Miss Marvel and Captain Marvel runs where where Carol Danvers first turns into Captain Marvel, and then when she basically, they take on or they bring in Kamala Khan, and right now we're currently in Miss Marvel issue number 11, I believe, and you want to be able to catch up. The trade paperback is such a good way to be able to get to that point. And be well versed in that particular comic without having to spend too much money, especially if some of those books are are definitely expensive and hard and sought after at that point. Um, the good thing about this is that they probably have just as good of a selection as the quote unquote hipster comic shop. They probably, you may ask yourself, to what degree are they any different from that particular shop? And I mean, my answer, my experience would lend the answer that they've been around longer, and and they may have a little deeper knowledge of comics as they relate to things that are prior to the year 2000. And then also that, let's see here, sorry, one second, you guys. And that, on occasion, you might actually find some bookstores that tend to discount their trade paperbacks so that they're not selling it for full retail. And those are the types of stores that you always want to visit occasionally, especially if you're the type of person who's reading or trying to like just build your knowledge of a particular comic book universe. Or for example, if I wanted to be very well versed in like the Frank Miller Daredevil era, then being able to spend like $40-$50 in getting two or three volumes or two or three books that would comprise that run, would be a great way to do it. And so, that's my take on the bookstore. I also think that they do a pretty good job with the variants as well. I think that those types of bookstores, once a trending book comes out, like they'll basically sell out pretty quickly. So being able to find like a stealth buy or anything like that may be a challenge. But on the most part, I think that there's still pretty good books. There's still pretty good stores to come by and visit. Just especially if you like I said, if you're looking for for a store that gives you a pretty broad selection of trade paperbacks, that might be the way to go. And lastly, we have just the regular old comic shop, and I'm coming up on about 15 minutes, so I might save the rest of my collection for another video. But I'm about probably third of the way through at this point on the Silver and Bronze Age stuff. The last one, obviously, is the comic shop that is for the collectors, for the very active collector. You're there. You want to be able to you leverage them hopefully for CGC support. You want to be able to um, have them use a pull list, or offer a pull list, so that you're never without a book. Like, for example, if you couldn't make it to the comic shop on a Wednesday and you showed up on a Thursday, that your favorite book wasn't gone because something huge happened in that particular issue. You want to be able to see a better selection of variants that they have. They'll be the ones that are more likely than not participating in Free Comic Book Day. They'll also be the ones where, if you're looking to collect older books, they may be the store that has wall books that you'll be able to spend some money on, to get just that really nice, like, 40-year-old or 30-year-old book. And also, one other thing that's huge about this type of store is that, or you would hope to find in a store like this, is that they have some sort of rewards program that, they can keep you on account because you've participated in their pull list, and that there are like reward dollars or something of that sort. So that, for example, at my local shop, for every $10 that I spend, they track a $1 reward certificate. So, I tend to not use my reward dollars until something really big has happened. And so, for example, I'm at about $30 of rewards, meaning that I've spent $300 over the last, probably couple of months, just buying supplies, buying my regular pull list, things like that, a couple other books here and there. And over that time, this $30 will help greatly subsidize when I plan to get the 1 in 100 Alex Ross variant for Champions #1. So they may be selling that book for, on day one, on I believe October 12, 2016, for like $49.99 or $59.99. And, if I have $30 already kind of in my proverbial back pocket, then I'm really only spending $19.99 for a book that, that can go up in value pretty quickly, depending on how sought after that book is. But particularly for that one, it's a 1 in 100, so you would imagine that there can only be so many of those that were actually in circulation. So hopefully this helped you out. I mean, this is definitely one of these strategies where I've actually gone to Las Vegas, or I've gone to San Jose, or to San Francisco / Oakland, and I've employed this tactic to really kind of give myself a map and an itinerary as to how to go from store to store. I don't want to have to put myself through the situation where I drove like 15 or 20 minutes out of the way to go to a store where I'm not necessarily buying anything, and frankly, I'm not impressed with what I'm finding. I can sit there and say to myself, this is what my agenda is on this particular day or this particular trip. And, I know, am I going to be diving into back issue bins, or am I looking specifically for a couple of, current modern books that are, that I can basically flip and, make like $10 a book off of. Those are the types of things that I basically try to employ so that I can make the most out of it. Because if you miss one or two, if you go to one or two bookstores and it's a complete miss, before you know it, including the time that you've spent to try to salvage the experience at that bookstore, before you know it, you've spent like 90 minutes between two bookstores, where you could have been at that next bookstore that you weren't able to make it to by closing time and spend a good hour and a half there and really, get into their bins. So hopefully that helps you out. Like I said, I'm probably about like halfway through my silver and bronze age stuff. I hope you enjoyed the rotating background, and for you beginner collectors out there, that you find this somewhat helpful. So good luck in hunting, and I will see you guys soon. Thanks a lot.